Hello, Patriots. Welcome to Doug's Democracy Den. Here in the Den, we like to talk about American government, American politics, and current events. At every visit to the Den, we pay tribute to the flag and the country by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Feel free to join. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let's talk polls. If you're following any news at all, you hear all kinds of things about polls, all kinds of polls. Why are they doing all these polls, and what are they trying to tell you? Are they trying to tell you the truth, or are they trying to tell you some various version of the truth? Well, since this is the presidential election year, there's a lot of that going on. A lot of polling flying at you, a lot of numbers. They seem to bounce all over the place. When polling companies are conducting polls, if they're looking for the truth, they try to be as accurate as possible in how they gather their data. Since the data they're gathering is asking somebody about their presidential election choice, you would think they would be careful about picking the people they are asking. What do I mean by that? A polling company who's trying to do a correct and really accurate poll will try to approximate in the poll the distribution of the general populace. How many men, how many women, and then all the races. They'll try to approximate in the poll what the general population looks like to get an accurate reflection in the poll of the general population. That's pretty basic, and that's pretty how you go about this polling. So when you see on the news the top line of a new poll, and they say one candidate has 49% of the vote and one candidate has 41% of the vote, that's called the top line of the poll. And that's the headline they'll use, and that's the news story they'll go with. But you gotta dig deeper into the details of the poll. Down at the bottom in small print, it'll tell you how many people they questioned. Most polls are based on about 800 people. They'll also tell you another thing to pay attention to correctly interpret polling. They'll tell you if they questioned registered voters or likely voters. Now, which one of those is better to have to try to get a more accurate poll? When you say registered voters, you say, oh, they're registered, so that must make them official. So that would be better. No. Registered voters is actually the worst way to go about it. Because there are thousands of people who are registered who never vote, have no interest in participating. But polling companies, if they don't want to work too hard, they'll just phone up everybody. They'll go down a list and phone people and say, are you a registered voter? And if they say, yeah, I'm registered, then they'll ask them. But just because that person is registered doesn't mean they're interested, doesn't mean they have any interest in participating, doesn't mean they will participate. Polling companies who are really trying to do a more accurate job will do more work in identifying what we call likely voters. That means people who have a history of voting. Anybody can be registered. We're looking for people who have a history of voting, who vote in every election. These are the people who will give you reliable results in a poll. So when you're looking at polls, if it says based on registered voters, that's kind of a wonky poll. If it's looking at likely voters, that's a more serious poll with more serious work behind it, and will theoretically produce a more accurate result. Now, beyond the registered versus likely, they'll also give you a breakdown of all the people they ask. They'll tell you how many were Democrats, how many Republicans, how many were independents. If those numbers aren't reasonably approximate with each other, somebody is messing with the poll. If you have asked 800 people and 50% of them were Democrats, guess what? You're going to have a Democrat slanted poll. If you ask 800 people and 50% were Republicans, you're going to have a Republican slanted poll. That's how they can sway these polls without you even paying attention to it. By how many people they ask, and by how many people they ask from each party. and if they're registered or likely. That's how you have to interpret the results of polls. I have done polling, professional polling, in both millage issues and certain other races. And I have always been very accurate. And the only way to be very accurate is to ask actual people actual questions and get a reliable sample of likely voters. That's how it works. Any other way of asking an overabundance of one or the other is trying to sway the poll. And that's the news item you'll get. Now there's one other specific poll I want to talk about that you haven't run into yet, and you only run into it on one day a year. You run into it on election day. It's called an exit poll. What is the purpose of an exit poll? Well, all the news agencies on election day are sitting around with nothing to do because you're voting, but there are no results yet. So by an exit poll, they're trying to create results. They go out around the country and they ask people who have voted, who'd you vote for? And people will tell them, not thinking about it. And they'll gather that information. And so at 8 o'clock Eastern, when all the networks come on with election coverage, and they have that big, beautiful wall map with all 50 states, at 8 o'clock, the polls have just closed on the East Coast. But they will start lighting up states, saying, he won this one, she won that one, he won that one. What are they basing that on? No votes have been counted yet. They're basing it on exit polls. They're basing it on accosting voters in the parking lot outside the polling place and asking them who they voted for. That's an exit poll. In my classes for years, I have told my students, if you are ever approached in a parking lot after you have voted by a person with a clipboard asking you who you voted for, do one simple thing. Lie to them. One, your vote is private, it's none of their business. Two, if enough of us lie to them, it will screw up their results, and they might light up the wrong state at 8 o'clock, wrong color, and that'll just be funny. Exit polls are bullcrap. They are trying to predict the story without having the story. Why don't we just wait to count the votes and actually have the story? Thanks for visiting. See you next time.